Very good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen of the media of Trinidad and Tobago and the region. Good afternoon to you. It's my honor and privilege to present our guest, the leader, Hakeem Jeffries of Brooklyn, where most Trinidadians reside outside of our national borders, and the delegation from the United States. This is the opportunity to hear from him for a moment and to take a few questions from the media corps. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic over to Leader Hakeem Jeffries.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for hosting us in such a phenomenal way over the last day or so. Thank you for your insight, for your wisdom, for your hospitality, for the leadership that you continue to provide here in the region, in connection with our special relationship that we have between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States of America, certainly in connection with CARICOM, as we have celebrated the 50th anniversary of the founding of this extremely important multilateral organization. I'm here with a bipartisan delegation of members of the United States House of Representatives. Representative Radawagan from America Samoa, the top Republican on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Representative Greg Meeks, the top Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and a champion for this relationship between our two countries and between the United States and CARICOM. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, the first vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and a prominent member of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Stephen Horsford, who also has roots here in Trinidad and Tobago, and so it's been a very special trip for him. And Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, the immediate past chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and a leader on the Financial Services Committee on issues related to development and international finance. The last 2 days has been incredibly informative for us. We came to Trinidad and Tobago to listen, to find a common path forward, and then to go back to Washington, D.C. to act. Act in the best interests of the relationship between the United States and Trinidad and Tobago, act in the best interests of the relationship between America and CARICOM. We understand that we have a shared history, that we share a neighborhood, and that, of course, we have shared values. Trinidad and Tobago, a multi-ethnic, thriving democracy. And as evidenced by the congressional delegation that also included Congressman Joaquin Castro, the top Democrat on the Subcommittee of Foreign Affairs with jurisdiction over the Western Hemisphere, our delegation is an indication that America continues to thrive as a multi-ethnic democracy as well. The issues that have been discussed so eloquently has been raised by the Prime Minister include finding a path forward to tackle the challenges related to the explosion, unacceptably, of gun trafficking and gun violence. Gun violence is something that we're no stranger to here as members who represent congressional districts in America, and that unfortunately has been visited upon the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And we understand that the guns that are being illegally trafficked here to Trinidad and Tobago, that are being used in violent acts, are guns that aren't manufactured here in Trinidad and Tobago. They're guns that in almost every instance is manufactured and initially purchased in the United States of America. It's a challenge that we are going to confront decisively in the best interests of our two countries. We also look forward to, in closing, finding a path forward as it relates to the climate crisis that we, of course, have to confront, as well as ensuring that the energy security, the economic security of Trinidad and Tobago in a challenging geopolitical environment can be sustained and can thrive. And we're committed to finding a path forward to ensure that that energy security for Trinidad and Tobago, that the economic growth and development that has been such a tremendous success story for Trinidad and Tobago is able to continue. So thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for giving me an opportunity to share some opening remarks. And I think all of the difficult questions will go to Congressman Gregory Meeks.
Well, you manage delegation, and I'll manage the time. So you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Ground TV6 News, sir. I'm just wondering what the point.
Please identify yourself and your media house. Thanks.
Ground TV6 News. I'm just wondering, sir, in the context of what you just said with regard to the issue of gun violence and the manufacturing of guns, ammunition in the United States, but you do have a very strong lobby of groups that are pro-gun ownership, etc. How challenging is that in the context of what you were discussing in trying to deal with the issue of gun violence, both in the United States and in Trinidad and Tobago?
It's a very important question, and one of the things that we have discussed, we're so thankful for Ambassador Candace Bond, who does a tremendous job in navigating the relationship, enhancing it between our two countries. One of the things that our delegation has discussed is that in the last Congress, we were able to finally break the back of that strong gun lobby, the NRA, and pass gun safety legislation in America for the first time in 30 years. That is a foundation to do more, but may also provide us with an opportunity to meet the moment in terms of the gun trafficking challenges that we confront in the United States of America and that you confront here in Trinidad and Tobago. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, for the first time, made gun trafficking and straw purchasing both internal within the United States of America and in terms of the international trafficking of guns to places like Trinidad and Tobago a federal crime. And it will give the Department of Justice, it will give the ATF, it will give the FBI the ability now to more aggressively go after the gun traffickers who are flooding our communities in the United States of America and your country here in Trinidad and Tobago with weapons of war in ways that are unconscionable and unacceptable. Let me also say that the Biden administration clearly shares this commitment. The president's presence of Secretary Blinken, Secretary of State, here at the CARICOM conference was incredibly important and meaningful. And he's indicated that as a result of leadership from President Biden and Vice President Harris and the administration, they've designated a special prosecutor specifically charged with jurisdiction to hold gun traffickers accountable, including those who are trafficking weapons internationally into the Caribbean.
Related to Joel's question, reiterate from the Trinidad Express, what degree of focus is there on rigorous scrutiny of containers coming out of the United States? Because the question of a trade in arms has to do not just with prosecuting, but with getting containers that are going out. And is there, what I'm trying to find out is, there is a sense that the United States is more interested in looking at containers coming into its borders rather than those going out to countries like the Caribbean region. So is there going to be a commensurate effort on that aspect of the trafficking, as opposed to just establishing a prosecutorial body?
Yeah, one of the most insightful moments, I think, for all of us as a delegation, and I want to provide any opportunity for any members to additionally weigh in, but Congresswoman Clark has made that observation in asking the question as to what is the manner by which guns have been illegally trafficked into Trinidad and Tobago. I think, and we'll continue to try to ascertain the process by which the guns are being trafficked. Is it through containers? Is it coming in through ports of entry and shipping channels? Are they being brought in through airplane flights? Or is it all of the above? I think part of the reason why that question was asked is because we intend to take the information that we continue to receive from Prime Minister Rowley and the administration here in Trinidad and Tobago to try to enhance our enforcement efforts. We want to be good neighbors. The last thing that we want to do is export our gun violence problem to Trinidad and Tobago. And we take the challenge that you now face seriously and intend to work with the administration back in the United States of America to encourage them to use all available resources in terms of enforcement to look at what comes in, but also what is going out.
Let me just add that as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I will be working with colleagues in a bipartisan manner to look at, we've got the technology already for container screening, but the deployment, how much resource is being dedicated to it, and if in fact there's a way that, because we currently do a sort of a sampling, that we can do much more in terms of container screening. And again, as our leader has said, looking at all manner in which the Caribbean region is seeing sort of the stream of weaponry coming into the region. We can use our support through our Department of Homeland Security to tighten up and begin to crack the code on trafficking.
Ask what percentage of the effort will be focused on arms going to Haiti as opposed to the other region, because that is an area of particular.
Then we have to take a comprehensive look at the challenge that all of the CARICOM nations are facing with respect to gun trafficking and the rise of gun violence. And every single leader that we've met with over the course of the last day or so has raised gun trafficking and gun violence as a challenge. Certainly, Prime Minister Rowley has raised it as a significant issue that we need to find a way to tackle and tackle decisively, and it is our intention to do just that.
Good morning, Jeffries from the Newsday. We would have heard about the coordinator of Caribbean firearms prosecutions being named from the Department of Justice. Can we find out a bit more about that role and what it entails?
Well, it was an announcement that was just made by Secretary Blinken, and I think it was an acknowledgement of the fact that the voices of the Prime Minister here in Trinidad and Tobago, of other CARICOM leaders, going back to the conference that was held in Los Angeles, continuing through the dialogue that was led in part by Vice President Harris with CARICOM leaders earlier in the Bahamas, through this engagement that took place here in Trinidad and Tobago over the last day or so, that the voices and the concerns that have been raised have been heard. And we certainly will make sure that we communicate to the Biden administration that there's great interest in providing as much visibility and insight into the role as it develops. But I think that the people of Trinidad and Tobago should take it as a clear sign that the United States of America, that the Congress, that the Biden administration has heard the concerns related to gun trafficking and gun violence here in Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the Caribbean, and we're prepared to respond decisively to address it.
A question on the issue of energy security, as you discussed earlier. That matter for CARICOM and Trinidad and Tobago in particular is tied to the issue of U.S. sanctions on Venezuela. And I'm wondering, at what point could the region and Trinidad and Tobago in particular see any further movement with regard to the issue of easing or further easing of sanctions on Venezuela?
Very important question. We've heard the concerns that have been raised very clearly by the Prime Minister and other leaders over the last day or so. And we want to try to find a path forward, a way that makes sense in a complicated geopolitical environment. And certainly I think that will be one of our takeaways as we return back to the country, to the United States. But let me also yield to someone who is very practiced and familiar in this area, who we all have great confidence in, top Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and if I dare say, the once and future chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Gregory Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. First, I want to thank President Rowley, who has brought this issue up several times. Every time he visits the United States, anytime he talks to a member of the United States Congress or the administration, this is an issue that he has articulated and talked about how important it is for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And what was significant is he did it again in the presence of Secretary Blinken at the plenary session of CARICOM. And the message hits home. And we know that that dialogue and conversation, because the significance and importance of the relationship that we have with Trinidad and the Caribbean is significantly and important. And so there's dialogue that is going on and will continue to go on. And as he has told all of us, it has to happen soon because the pressure is on with reference to continue to compete. And that is the purpose of us being here. We were told that, do you see us? Do you hear us? Do you feel us? And I think that that message, we see, we hear, and we feel. And we'll go back, as the leader said, to work to make a difference.
Additional questions?
Hi, Congressman. Do you have any comment on the statements made by Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez that the policy on Venezuela and Cuba are not really related to the question of democracy versus autocracy, but it's rooted in American domestic politics and the strength of the Latin vote, particularly in Florida, and also the global issue of who controls resources.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the precise nature of his statement, but I will just say generally, if you look at the global stage, that we are locked in increasingly a global conflict between democracy and autocracy, between freedom and tyranny, between truth and propaganda. And we're seeing it in sharp focus now, of course, with the war in Ukraine. But autocracy has been on the rise all across the world. And so that remains an authentic, legitimate concern of the United States of America, and I think an authentic, legitimate concern for the free world. one of the things that we do value about our relationship with Trinidad and Tobago is that we have this shared democratic values, a shared system of freedom and liberty, a belief in the opportunity to control the fate of themselves and their community and their government, self-determination, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we do take it seriously that there are many people across the world who don't share those values. And so, without being familiar with the precise nature or context of the president's statement, I do think it is important for everyone to understand that this delegation, President Biden, the country, the Congress, takes seriously the conflict that we are locked into right now in this world between a free system of governance and an autocratic one.
I just saw a lot of TDT news. I believe it was in 2018 the U.S. Customs and Border donated about 4 mobile scanners to Trinidad. Any consideration going forward in the future for this again?
So I missed the last part of your question.
Any consideration for this going forward to any donation
Related to COVID.
with regards to the container scanners or any technical expertise?
Yeah, we can certainly request it, and it is something that we will, given the nature of the challenges that we increasingly confront in the space that relates to the trafficking that we've previously discussed and in other areas, we'll certainly look into it. And I know it's something that Congresswoman Clark has been focused on.
Okay, let's have one more question. Two ladies, that's it, right? Thank you.
But I want to bring you into this question a little bit.
Really?
Yes, yes,
I'm here all the time.
it's a simple question.
Yeah.
I noticed that there was no Venezuelan representative given tributes on the, in the long list of countries. And I wanted to ask you, as a leader of a country which is engaged in discussions with Venezuela, and as part of a community that has had historical ties with Venezuela, why was it that there was no one present? Was there no invitation? And I want to ask the congressman, in the same breath, whether there were any conditions attached to their presence in Trinidad and Tobago for this event.
Well, we are virtually in touch with Venezuela from CARICOM on a daily basis. And heads of government, as a matter of fact, I think one is on the way there now, one just came back from it. So we are continuously in touch with Venezuela. And I don't know that, I couldn't say whether an invitation went out or not, but the absence of a Venezuelan person at the floor wasn't really viewed as any slight or anything like that. The region, all of us in CARICOM, we are continuously in touch and working with the authorities in Venezuela. And the other one, there were no conditions laid down by us here. And I'm not aware of any condition laid down by the Americans for being here. As a matter of fact, this delegation represents hours of work, long distance of travel over a period of time to bring us to a place where the leaders in the Caribbean can have this kind of contact and dialogue with the decision makers in Washington. We presented this case for the need for this kind of relationship between us and the United States, and it was an agreement by the president that this should happen, and is happening. We've had more contact with the United States decision makers in the last 9 months than we've had in the last 9 years, and I think it's all for the good.
Prime Minister extended the invitation for us as a congressional delegation to participate, and we enthusiastically accepted because of our respect for your Prime Minister, our respect for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and for our respect for the CARICOM nations and leaders. And we wanted to acknowledge and celebrate and mark this occasion, the 50th anniversary of this incredibly important multilateral organization, and also send a clear signal that we look forward to working closely together. I want to just yield briefly to the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Stephen Horsford, who is here in that capacity, but also has very close familial ties to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And it was a special trip for him and a special thing for him to be part of this delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. And as you indicated in response to the question, the invitation was made directly to Leader Jeffries in his capacity as the Democratic leader of the House. An invitation was made to me as the chair of the Black Caucus. And several weeks ago, the Congressional Black Caucus led a meeting with Secretary Blinken on a host of issues, including some of the priorities around the Caribbean. And during that meeting, we pressed the administration to also have a big presence here at the 50th anniversary. One, to follow up on the work that Vice President Harris has been leading around Caribbean initiatives and the $100 million announcement that was made in the Bahamas, as well as the work that has been done with President Biden and others at the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles. And I just want to commend Prime Minister Rowley and all of the leaders and heads of state from CARICOM, because this is about a partnership. And what you emphasized, Prime Minister, is there's a big percentage of Caribbean people who are now our constituents living in the United States. So it's incumbent upon us to also know what the regional needs are here, because those constituents care deeply about all the issues that we discussed during this trip.